Hello, everyone. Welcome to this week's episode of Catholic ReCon Testimonies from Reverts and Converts. I'm your host, Eddie Trask. This week's guest is Jason Woodcook, whose brother was on a few weeks ago, Tyler. And I'm really excited because I met Jason probably a few months ago, and I remember hearing bits and pieces of his testimony. This is typical when I speak with people. And I think I believe it's a grace. I will hear a story and then it's gone. But I know that when I'm hearing it, just a heartfelt, beautiful story, but then I lose it. And so again, I assume that's some unexpected grace. But Jason, thank you so much for agreeing to be on the program.
Oh, absolutely. Thanks for having me.
So the way I begin with a lot of the interviews is I like to go back to when it all started. Maybe if you can address your upbringing and some of the early formative years, that would be very helpful.
Okay. Um, you know, from a faith perspective, there wasn't a lot of involvement in my childhood. Um, my paternal grandfather was a Nazarene pastor for about 30 years, ending about a decade before my birth. So I understand that Dad grew up going to church a lot, to Nazarene services, and he would joke that he learned to sleep with his eyes open. I don't know. He said that. He said he'd utilize that later in boot camp or something like that. That's about the extent. That's about all I heard. I learned
Wow.
to sleep with my eyes open. That was about it. My mom, I think, maybe had some vague Episcopalian upbringing. I know when I was 10 or 11, about once a year, my mom would decide we were all going to go to church. And you go do like a little mini tour of the non-denominational Lutheran, a couple of those different ones in the valley. By about the third or fourth week, she'd be like, "This is it. This is what we're doing." And then we'd all go as a family the next week. This is the new thing. This is going to happen. We're going to do this. And then that would be the only time we go. And then about a year had passed, and we do it again. And that happened several times.
Do you know why it was so short-lived? Was it because of the church itself, or you guys just I don't know.
Um, my mom, I don't want to sound critical of her, but she will sometimes kind of get an idea and then just not kind of follow through on it.
Oh, sure. Yeah. That
So
makes
it'd be like really, it'd be like a real hot button issue for about a month, in which case, and that at the conclusion of we all go together. And I told my sister about this the other day, and she was like, "Oh, yeah, I do remember that." Because it's funny the different things we remember. She's like, "I forgot all about that." I'm like, "Oh yeah, this was like a family tradition in this weird kind of way."
That's
So
crazy. So every so often you were saying this would happen.
yeah, yeah. But eventually that kind of fizzled out by the time like high school or later. And then there wasn't a lot of formal religious involvement of any sort for quite a while, actually. Um, so I was in the Marine Corps for a few years, and I was getting out, and my dad said, "Hey, you should go work in the jail while you go to Boise State," because he'd previously worked in for a local sheriff's office. So I said, "Okay. I mean, I don't really have any other plan. I'll do that." So I went and worked in jail for a bit. Again, really no religious uh, kind of involvement. It was always just kind of growing up. It was what I would call vaguely Protestant, not really leaning any which way in particular. And some of the stuff, and I'll get to this maybe a little later, but some of the stuff where when I came to join the church, I realized that like uh, by worldly standards, I was a decent human being, right? But I had to learn to adapt myself um, to the demands of the faith.
Yeah.
So there would be some years there where I would later have, because to me, I was working for local law enforcement. I was following the rules, but from a faith-based, especially a Catholic-based perspective, I was outside the lines, so to speak. So, but I ended up, and um, how do I go for it? So I ended up in 2009, I met a nurse who worked the jail when I was a jail deputy, and we would later get married a couple years later. And she was Catholic, is Catholic, and she kind of reintroduced me to, or introduced me to the faith a little bit. I'd gone a couple times to Catholic mass when I was a kid. If you stayed over at certain friend, like one of my friend's house, if you stayed over Saturday night, you either had to go that night or Sunday morning. And he's like, he always say, hey, you got to go up for to receive the Eucharist like this because you're like a little kid. Because he always said like a little kid. I don't really know what that meant at the time. And I know lots of adults go for a blessing, it's fine, but I remember that distinctly sticking out, something he said 25 years ago.
Wow.
So we got married in 2011, and again, not critical of her or anything, but it was kind of what I would call a very nominally Catholic marriage, in the sense that she was raised Catholic and we got married by a priest in a church here in the Valley. And then we went to mass the next day at my recommendation, and then we never talked about it or did anything with it ever again. So yeah, it was kind of like I don't know, a little bit of foreshadowing or something.
Sure.
And then, and that's unfortunate. But and some years after that, a couple years after that, I don't know what it was, the cynicism of parts of my career. I love my career, but there's parts of it that are a little, the wear on you, especially working, till 6:30 in the morning every day and that sort of thing in the middle of winter and that sort of thing. I came to this point in my life where I found myself trying to talk myself out of faith, talk myself into disbelief or unbelief, or however you want to phrase it, where I said, I don't know if I believe in this stuff, any of it. And I was, at the time, by any standard, Protestant, Catholic, Orthodox, whatever you want to look at, I was very poorly catechized. I had very limited knowledge. Oh, sorry. Peter said I was going to lock up, but we're good now. And that persisted for a few years. And my son was born in 2014. And I remember my mom chastising me for not, he was still in the NICU, and he was like a little tiny guy. And he was chastising me for not immediately baptizing him. I'm like, well, we're working on one thing at a time, and she's not even particularly religious, but I remember having that conversation with her. And some time went on, and again, I don't want to, I don't know, I feel like sometimes my whole story, it feels very messy to me,
Mm-hmm.
and I'm like, my brother, I love my brother. He seems very like by the rules and organized. And I know that's not always the case, but I ended up getting a civil divorce in 2016. And then sometime shortly after that, I remember kind of the seeds of faith kind of coming back into my life, not related to that at all, of course. It just coincidental.
Yeah.
It would be like little things. It would be little things like my friend, like a coworker would tell me they were going to church on Sunday. And I'm like, oh, I kind of want them to invite me. I'm not gonna impose, but I kind of want you to, would you take me? But I don't want to say anything. I'll just see if they invite me. We'll just see. And it was very faint. It was just this little bit, and that persisted for a couple of years.
Were you ever invited?
No, not for a couple of years.
Okay.
I was invited to my friend's service. His family's originally from Ukraine. This is years ago for all the political hot button stuff of the current moment. But he invited me to a Slavic service. It was all in English, but it was culturally kind of leaned that way, and it was all it was a Protestant service. And I went, and it was nice. I enjoyed it, but I was like, that's not quite it. It's not quite, whatever it was, it works for him and works for his family, and that's great. And he's my brother in Christ, but it wasn't quite there for me. And it took a little more time and kind of discerning and just reading, and then kind of over time, like three kind of options kind of bubbled up, so to speak. And the three options that I kind of had to vet out One of the first, there was one Protestant option, and it was Nazarene, and
Sure.
based on the family history. And my brother and I, we have the same dad, but different mothers. So on his side of the family, there's actually two grandpas that were Nazarene pastors. And we, of course, one we share. There was a lot of them in the family. I think I can attribute me living in Idaho or even been alive to the Nazarene Church. My grandfather moved out here in probably the 60s or so, and then my dad followed him to be near his dad. And then met my mom and all that. So, um, but but I kind of looked at it a little bit. I even talked to my brother once. I said I'd like to learn. I have no interest in ever leaving the Catholic Church, but I'd like to learn a little more about the Nazarene faith, just for the sake of maybe understanding my grandfather a little more. He passed away when I was a young teen. I was like 14. And again, not any replacement or anything like that for my current faith. I just kind of understand him. That was a big part of his life for a long time. I kind of eyeballed. There's some sort of, it's kind of because it's so exotic in Boise, Idaho, in the Rocky Mountains. I kind of looked at the Orthodox Church, and I have my own personal theories of why East and West broke 1,000 years ago. I think it's a lot to do with it's really hard to get information from Rome all the way out into Eastern Europe. So I hope that someday the church can unite. But I said I culturally, and the other things I learned, about St. Peter and that, I'm like, I don't think this isn't the right one. It's close. It's not the right one. So I had been married at Holy Apostles there in Meridian on Chinnen Road.
Oh, that's where you were. Okay. Back in,
yeah. That's where I did RCIA, and then now OCIA. But I was working in Star at the time on like a late day shift, and I kept driving by, on the way to something, or every once in a while we go help out Eagle or Meridian or that sort of thing. And I said, I kept feeling called to just go in the office and talk to him a little bit, just sit down. And I don't remember honestly how much I looked up about the RCIA process. I think I looked up a little bit, maybe not. I think I just kind of walked in the office. I had a lot of questions, all sorts of questions. But I thought about going there for several months before I actually walked in the door. And by the time I walked in the door, I felt overwhelmingly confident that I was going to join the church. Like I feel like a lot of people, it was very arms extended, open.
Sure.
The staff there, like, hey, ask some questions, no obligation. You can stay, you can ask questions. If it's not your thing, that's okay. There was no browbeating, there was no heaviness to it, which was a nice atmosphere. But at the same time, I felt really pulled to it, if that makes sense. After all, I try to do it my own way for a long time, right? I try to do it. Say I don't need faith. I don't need these in my life. And I fought against it, and I felt like I tried to talk myself out of stuff. And by the time I got there, I said, no, I need this. And then spent the next while kind of adapting my worldview in many ways.
Yeah.
And in many ways, a lot of the stresses of the world, things that would just kind of get me torqued up about things. I'm like, people get mad about stuff. Like it's actually brought me a lot of peace. Wow. A lot of peace.
Let me ask you this though, when those several months where you, I guess, felt pulled towards that parish.
Yeah.
Were you just thinking about the Catholic faith by that point? Because I know you had just mentioned you had kind of investigated the Orthodox Church. Or were you drawn to the fact that you knew that parish?
I think,
go ahead.
So, I mean, up until the end, you can imagine you have like 3 equal strips, right? And then over time, the Catholic one is that lane got wider and wider. And I think I never visited an Orthodox parish. The closest I ever did was I used to live down at 26 in Jefferson. There's the Greek Orthodox Church
Yep,
down there,
yep.
and they used to have their food festival. So I go, and since I lived on their block, they always gave me free vouchers, which was very kind of them because the parking was awful for about 3 days. But as far as this I never visited one. I didn't visit the Nazarene Church. I felt drawn there. I think I went to that particular parish at the time because I knew it.
Yep.
It was the only one that I had been in. When I was going to mass as a kid, just a couple times with my friend, his friend's family, the Catholic family, took me to mass. It was out at Risen Christ, but out on Lake Hazel. But it was like, it was like the size of a convenience store inside. It was very, very small, and I think they built the campus and um, built the church
Around
up.
it. Yeah.
Yeah, I think it was, yeah, because they have a fellowship hall cafeteria
Yep.
type, and I think that is the old church.
Really? And then they
Yeah, I
built the
believe.
ark. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
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 So yeah, I remember seeing a gym teacher get his kid baptized, and it's always weird when you're a kid seeing I don't know, random aside. I remember seeing, oh, you're like a teacher. He's like a regular guy, when you're like in the 8th grade or something. They
Yeah.
have families and stuff.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think I ended up at Holy Apostles because it was familiar and comfortable, and once upon a time I know the priest there who had actually been moved to another parish because they do that on occasion.
Yeah.
I had all sorts of like really like not obscure but odd questions. You see like icons. Like are icons okay? And you walk in and you see one on the wall there. And you're like, oh, okay. Like that answers that question. On to the next. But I had a lot of learning to do. I still do. But I felt drawn there for the time being. And
How
then
long ago was this? This was like not this summer, right? It was the
yeah,
summer.
August of 22.
Okay. Yep.
So I would have been. I was baptized Lutheran when I was like 6 weeks old. So it's actually kind of funny. I had to go find my baptismal records, and I got baptized by a sheriff's office chaplain in our living room on the Boise bench in 1983. So finding those records was kind of difficult. He had since moved up to Montana, had to make all sorts of phone calls. I think his son is some sort of Lutheran pastor now, or does something like that. I finally got a hold of him. He's in his 70s, might be 80. And he said, well, yeah, actually, I started Hope Lutheran Church in Linder and State. It's probably there. So I go in and they pull out the book, and we're looking for January of 1983, a couple months after my birth, and we're looking for it. And they're like, can't find it, can't find it. I'm like, well, that's really odd. They were very certain it was around this date. And then I glance over from the right page over the left page, and I'm like, January 1982 is what the record showed. Of course, I wouldn't be born until November of that year. So we had
They
to
weren't.
fix like a 40-year-old typographical error.
Shoot.
But yeah, so we found that, and because that was really important, um, so that I knew that I'd already been baptized, because I learned, from family member that went to went to join the church that he was dedicated, not baptized, and he didn't know that until he was in his 30s when he was joining the church. So that's a thing apparently.
Yeah.
So yeah, so I started the process. It was like by the time I walked in, RCIA was starting like the next week or
Okay.
something. It just started. It was like perfect. It just worked out exactly how it needed to. I was very confident very early on that that's where I needed to be, um, because of the nature of my work and that sort of thing. Sunday mornings are kind of usually pretty mellow. So on occasion, when I'd sit in the very back, but I'd be in uniform, and I'd sit in the back couple rows of mass, and nobody ever seemed to mind having me there, because my shift started at 9, mass started at 9, and then I would just kind of duck out right afterwards. Um, about a month in of going to mass and starting RCA, I had this one somewhere. It might have been one of those, it was like some quiet moment during mass. I think probably when you're waiting to go receive. Yeah, I remember being seated, so that would have been. It might have been during the collection time or something. I
Okay.
remember being seated, not kneeling. But I had like kind of this panic. I just for just a fleeting second, I said, "Do I really want to be here? Is this it? Do I? Is this where I'm supposed to be?" And but I was like, let's not make any rash decisions. Yeah, like another 30 minutes of mass, go through it. I walk out, and Holy Apostles has like a big the main church, you're familiar with it, kind of wraps around with all the like
Oh yeah.
auxiliary classrooms and stuff. So it's got a big cement courtyard. And this woman approached me. I'm probably like 3 feet out the door, and this probably just about old enough to be my mom came up in this very motherly way and said, "Hey, I've noticed you here a few times. I got you some things." Hands me a rosary, some holy water, some prayer cards, and says, "I'm so glad you're here. It's so good to see you. Let me know if you have any questions. This is how you contact me." And it was just this really, it was a really, I can't overstate how much of an impact that was. It was a really nice moment. All my doubts that I had were just gone. I was like, I, I don't know, but I feel like I was like, I think God put that woman. Her name's Terry. I think God put Terry there just for just to give me that extra little nudge. I just had this kind of just spooked feeling just for a minute. I'm like, am I doing the right thing? Am I supposed to be here? And then she came and talked to me and was just the sweetest, kindest person I'd ever could ever talk to in my life. Very candid. Um, it's something I kind of, because at this point I learned that there's an annulment process and that sort of thing, which I'm just about done with. I had to sit on it for a while. It was kind of a big thing.
Sure.
And she said, it's okay. Lots of people have these situations. And we talked about, I had questions about praying for those that have passed. I had early on, the rosary was very intimidating to me. I think I bought a couple that were a single decade. I think she answered some questions for that sort of thing. Because I'd never seen anything like it. I mean, I've seen them, but I wasn't familiar with anything like that. But I'm confident that God just put his person right there for me to just give me that extra, I don't know, push, nudge, tip, what you want to call it. Because after that, it was smooth sailing. That
So
makes sense.
RC, meaning RCIA, where you were still asking questions and getting answers and all that,
Yes, I
but
mean, I had a lot to learn,
yeah,
and for sure, I tell people I learn something about the Catholic faith every single day. I say if I have another 50 years on Earth, I'll still learn something every single day.
yeah,
Like I think there's a depth and richness to it. Um, I tell people I had to adapt my life. I think a lot of, and I don't want to sound critical, but I think some denominations and whatnot, they say it's okay, we'll adapt to you. And I say, well, I feel compelled to adapt my life to the church. It's so. And again, not being critical of others, but that's just kind of been my journey where I'm like, I need to tidy some stuff up. I've had a lot of talks with my brother. Like, I remember in RCIA, and again, a lot of people, there was a lot of talk about, I think a lot of people were going through annulments, and I was maybe really uncomfortable. I have a son out of this marriage. I
sure,
need to be a good example.
yeah,
Um, I know what it means if they say no. You know, it's
pretty, yeah,
like it's not what I want. It's what you know, it's what God wants. So it's um, the only thing I can do is create a good uh, share the accurate, full information. Beyond that, just step out of it.
yeah.
So
So how can you go back to? I'm assuming it was Easter Vigil when you came into the church.
mhm.
Can you speak to that experience and yeah, if you remember, or if some people
Oh
say, I
yeah,
don't even know what happened.
yeah. I think it
Everything's a
was.
blur.
I think it. There, I'll be honest. I need to go to a few more to fully grasp everything. It was a 3 hour service. Um, it was and I don't know if all parishes do this, but I think several do. We started in the courtyard with the bonfire. It was in and lit candles into the nave all the way to the sanctuary. So everybody was seated. Um, it was really beautiful, and I think at that point, because I think we had, what do you call the services on Thursday? It'd be like Maundy Thursday, but what would that? There's something we had to be there for, and I can't remember. And then we were there for Good Friday, and then we were there
Yeah.
for the Easter Vigil, and then of course I went to another parish the next day because I was so excited because I finally received Holy Communion. So it was a very faith-filled week. But the service was very um, it was very welcoming, and my brother was my sponsor, so he's also a convert. And he was really helpful. He was really involved in the RCIA process. He attended during the second phase, and forgive me, is it? I always get like the wrong version of the word, but is the second phase or OCIA now catechumenate?
Catechumenate, exactly.
Okay, so because there's catechized, catechumens, catechumenate.
Hey, trust me, I'm learning
It's the
myself.
reason I
So
struggle with that. I struggle with that body of words.
yeah.
But he was there with me the whole time. Um, I didn't have to get baptized because I'd done that previously, which also got me looking a lot at the time. I'd look a lot into baptism. Why is this
Yeah.
one accepted? Why is this one not
Not
accepted?
accepted. Yeah.
I have friends from faith traditions that are not accepted, but they sound at face value the same. So I look into it. Why?
Yeah, if you hear Christian baptism,
Yeah.
a lot of people just say, okay, Christian baptism, you're good.
Yeah, and I understand some have views of the Trinity that aren't what the Catholic Church would teach, and then ergo, if you join the church, you must be baptized in
Yes.
this Trinitarian fashion. But at face value, what they say, like, well, those are the same words,
Yeah.
but they assign a different meaning. So, but yeah, the Easter Vigil was really beautiful. It didn't feel like 3 hours. I'll tell you that. It kind of breezed by.
And
I'm
also,
currently,
go ahead. Go ahead.
I'm looking forward to this next year. I'm sponsoring a friend, and then
I don't even know if
for
I knew that. That's amazing.
oh yeah, and then my son, and then my I found out early on you can't sponsor your kid. I didn't know that. So my kid's old enough that he can't get baptized without going through OCIC. So my brother has graciously agreed to be his godparent. With some Godfather jokes in there at some point, I'm sure.
Exactly. Of course, you
But
can't miss that
so yeah,
opportunity.
so I started. Now I'm trying to bring two more Catholics in, um, and navigate some other issues when it comes with split households and that sort of stuff. But
Sure.
I pray and I hope that maybe it reconnects his mom to the faith. I have no ill will.
Yeah.
Um, Honestly, if I had this faith in place, then probably wouldn't be here.
Yeah.
Like in the same set of circumstances.
Sure.
I have since joining the church, I have a very different view of marriage.
Yeah.
When I was a kid, when I was a kid, everybody was divorced, remarried, or my Nazarene grandfather, him and his wife, my grandma, divorced after 47 years. My parents divorced after 22 years. So I have a very different view of that. So if I'm given the opportunity to do that again, I'm like, well,
Yeah.
that's the rest of my life.
It changes. Yeah, it changes everything when you learn the teaching, which
Yeah,
all the teachings. I mean, when you finally get it, you get it, and you can't unlearn that. I feel so.
yeah.
Yeah.
I
I
think some
wanted to,
people. Oh,
go
good.
ahead. Go.
I
Finish your
think some
thought.
people kind of rail against it, but then I just kind of touch back like nobody's making me, oh, you should need to do this, and nobody's, you need to do this. I feel peace when I follow the rules.
Yes.
It's not like following rules. That's such a crude way of
No.
putting it.
No. But what you're describing is so real. Um, you're given the freedom to express free choice that is aligned with God,
Hmm.
in step with the Holy Spirit, not perfectly, of course, but being in step with the Holy Spirit versus being in step with vice, basically, and with the enemy. So yeah, that's what it
Yeah,
is. You only
I,
feel that freedom if you're in union with Christ through his church, So
mhm.
yeah.
Um, To wit, I know that one thing that it's been my experience in talking to people about the Catholic faith. One thing that people kind of struggle with
Yeah.
is the sacrament of reconciliation.
Yeah, that's what I was going to ask you about, actually. So,
Oh,
yeah.
okay, go ahead.
No, that was going to say, what was that experience like? And you can even segue into why do people struggle with it?
I I kind of understand why. I think maybe I don't know. It never. Um, you mean you can kind of glean out my profession by what I was talking about, but I'm used to talking to people in uncomfortable kind of situations,
Sure.
and so I rather enjoy it. I'd like to sit with the priest directly. I don't like to sit behind the screen, but that's fine if that's somebody else's preference. But um, I find there's this lightness and warmth or something. However you want to. When I come out of that, I'm like, wow, like I dumped a heavy backpack off my back.
Yep.
Um, and I enjoy each time I go and learn something. And one of the priests I was talking to recently was like, yeah, and this thing and this thing. And he's like, that's you getting that now that you're a little further in the faith, more things are going to be more readily available or apparent to you.
Yeah.
Some things that I'm like, I'm sorry, I don't think I confessed this before. I never even thought of it, but he's like, that's normal. That's I encourage people to give it a try. I feel like the two things, if they're discerning the Catholic faith, I think that reconciliation is a big one that's kind of concerning to them. Forgive me if my Latin is off, but is in persona Christi?
Yep.
Okay.
Is that one of the reasons you think personally that people have trouble?
No, I think a lot of people, I think they're like, well, I don't want to tell this guy. I'm like, the priest is there, uh, but he's, uh, I don't want to like sound Calvin. He's a placeholder. He's in person of Christ. Um, you're going to see him again in the hallway or something like that, and he's not going to judge it. If somebody said something worse, it's going to be okay. One thing I was not certain about is I thought I had heard stories as a kid about the troubles in Ireland, um, between the IRA and the British Army in like Northern Ireland, that sort of thing. I could have sworn I'd heard like these stories of this priest breaking the seal of confession and telling to the police and all that. And I don't know where I got that idea in my head. And I'm like, I can't find any evidence of that ever.
Mm-hmm.
That was really emphasized. Whatever you say stays here. Um, like the priest will be defrocked. He will lose the priesthood if he says anything. I was like, wow, they take this really seriously.
Yeah.
And so, um, and any embarrassing thing you've done, I'm sure the priest has heard worse. It, we all have parts of our life that we're not proud of. It's going to be okay.
Yeah, it's amazing. I've spoken to some people about this, the courage that it does take. I mean, there's no doubt. Like if you want to be reconciled, right? There's a courage that takes place. But at the moment of courage is this incredible mercy that a lot of people, again, they may, I can say this because people have told me this, they didn't want to go because they were not ready to be courageous. So they came up with reasons why it didn't make sense. Oh, you can just go directly to God. You don't need to confess your sins to a priest.
Mm-hmm.
Come to find out, they said they had so much shame and guilt, they didn't want to open their mouth to another soul about what they had done. When they finally did so, they felt mercy in a way that they never could experience. It was so tangible for them, so visceral that it, as they say, it breaks chains. It
Mm-hmm.
legitimately converts hearts because the heart is finally saying, I'm sick of carrying this. I want to be reconciled. I want to love better, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah. And a lot of the saints in the past have said, hey, go every couple of weeks or every month.
Yeah.
But I did learn, and I recommend going more than this, but I did learn that the rule is you got to go at least once a year. So, if you're like, well, I can beat that, then, I can do better than that. I can go more often. But just, I throw that out there for anybody that's like, you know, maybe it's a little less intimidating that way.
Yeah, as a starting point, and then what I've heard is you start there and then you realize, boy, this actually is a great practice. And they don't view it as what's the bare minimum. They're saying, I need to.
Yeah, and I'm not encouraging you to do the bare
I know
minimum.
you're not. I'm just
trying
saying
to
it's
say,
a great
hey,
starting point, and then
yeah.
people can just see where it takes them.
And you'll in OCIC you'll get an opportunity, and should somebody go through that. And I went one more time right before the Easter Vigil. To me it was cleaning up for the big event,
Yeah,
so to speak.
Yeah.
One time my brother asked me to be godfather to his infant that was getting baptized. I made sure to go right before then. It seems like these big things, these big events, I'm like, well, I want to be as tidied up as I can, and I find it like very freeing in that regard. So life will give you these situations or times from time to time. A while back, I currently work in a school. In my current capacity, I work in a school, and West Ada has Wednesdays off. Randomly, not Wednesdays off. Occasional Wednesdays off for teacher in service. So I'm not a teacher, so I just have the day off. And they did it because teachers were taking 3 and 4 day weekends, so they had to put it in the middle of the week, which is kind of funny. I get that, but I looked at the schedule, and my parish has Wednesday reconciliation. A day mass followed by reconciliation, and I'm like, man, I should really go to that. I'd like to go to that. I have the day off. I don't have any other obligations all day. And it's like now at this point, it's Tuesday, the day before. I'm driving some errands, driving my Tacoma around town. I turn the radio on, to Salt and Light, and it's some recording. It's Bishop Fulton Sheen from like the 1960s, 50s or 60s.
Love it.
Talking about, he says two of the sacraments that bring you, the sacraments bring you closer to Christ, closer to God. But there's this one, and it was kind of like a setup. I'm like, what is he trying to say here? He said, there's this one that is not about closeness to God. And I'm like, wait, what does that mean? And it was kind of like, he was kind of like setting up a little twist. He's like, it's not the sacrament brings you closer to God, but the things leading up to it that maybe perhaps you do not. And he's like, and of course I'm talking about the sacrament of reconciliation. And I was like, this is the day before I'm planning to go. I'm hearing about this, tuned in, I'm listening to every word. I'm like, yeah, I really think I need to be there. I don't know, it just worked out that way. But I find it very freeing. So.
Well, I want to also, you mentioned what you do and how you have uncomfortable conversations and how you felt comfortable being able to sit face to face and confess. Can you speak just a little bit more about that and why that is? It just came naturally to you, and you're just
because go
ahead.
I think I did my first ever. It was in a day chapel, and there wasn't the traditional divider. But most of the time, especially if you go to normal hours, that sort of thing will be like a divider or something. And I'll usually just poke my head around and I'll say, "Excuse me, Father, do you mind if I sit with you?" I don't presume anything. Do you mind if I sit with you? And there's always a chair facing them directly, an empty chair you can sit in. But I don't like to be intrusive.
Sure.
And they're always, oh yeah, sure, have a seat. It's fine. But it always kind of starts like, do you mind if I sit with you? And I usually have a little book of prayers, and always have it to the is it the Confiteor? Am I saying that right?
Oh yeah, Confiteor. Yeah, I don't say it correctly either. Yeah.
So because but they'll have it provided there for you if you don't have it. But I just have it like the ribbon pulled into the book.
Yep.
And Um, and I noticed, and I'll just say it because I think it's okay. I'm not ashamed of this. I'm not proud of my actions, but I don't feel shame in the sense, um,
That you keep living there. And
yeah, I don't want other people to say, well, I don't want to do it because I do that. I don't
sure.
want to discourage them. But if you want to say about like seven, I don't know, we'll get into details about it, but there's like seven, deadly sins, so to speak.
Yeah.
I
Yep.
tend to struggle with like the same one.
Sure.
And I think that's how people are. I think, and that's, dying to yourself and being reborn and reforged in Christ. And it just took me a little practice. I am a work. I tell my son, we need to work in walking and being walking with Christ and being as Christ-like as we can. And he says, well, he's perfect. We're not perfect. I'm like, you're right, but we can try. We're going to fall short. We're going to fall short. But you can always try and keep going. So, um, like if somebody, I don't think any should, if they get to that point, should feel any pressure to sit with a screen, between you and the priest.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but if you're inclined to do so, sit with
Yeah.
the priest, have a conversation.
Yeah.
It's very pleasant. So I try to be mindful. There's other people waiting in line. Want to get right to it. Um, I do
And you
that
don't want to
examination of
yell.
conscience.
You don't want to, you want to watch your voice. You don't want to be yelling. So that's good.
Oh yeah, and I do the examination of conscience leading up, thinking about, well, what things, have I struggled with, and the church, has this phrase. I never heard it before I joined the Catholic Church. That near occasion of sin,
Yes.
and I'm like, but the first time I heard that phrase, I'm like, I know what that means. I know what that means. I know that that's when you're like, no, it's fine. I got
Yep.
control. I'm good. I'm
I'm
fine. It's
good.
not a
I'm
problem.
good. Yep.
And you're like, I'm putting myself in a situation I shouldn't. It's fine. And you gotta look at yourself, that examination of conscience, and go, you know, I know what's going on in here. God knows my heart. He knows, I'm lying to myself.
Yep.
I'm lying to him. I'm not. So, that was a helpful phrase, to kind of keep mindful, for me. I think that really, is this what I should be doing? Am I straddling the line here? It's like the, little kids in the back seat. The I'm not touching you, I'm not touching you type thing. So to me, it's
That's a good
you're
parallel.
like
Yes.
you're approaching the limit. As they say in mathematics, you're getting just a little
A
close. So
little close. Yeah.
yeah,
That's really good advice because with the examination, I don't know. If people haven't gone through it, it's so hard to explain
it,
just what it can do
yeah,
for you. I used to view it like a pomegranate. Do you know how you open a pomegranate and you can just continue getting, it's like they're hiding all of the seeds and you're just peeling it
yeah.
back.
Aren't they
And it's like
clustered in the middle,
they're
but they go into
clustered,
the
but
flesh?
it's crazy. I've always thought that was weird, even as a kid, that you could just keep digging and you're going to see more and more of these seeds. And behind the seeds, it's like you're getting under them. Well, with the examination, if you don't know, if you're on the outside looking in, you'd say, okay, this is just going to lead to insanity. What are you doing? You're inspecting yourself to this degree. But when you think in those terms, you're like, I want to be aware. I want to shine a light on the darkness, because the thing that stays hidden will be the thing that says, it's okay. It's okay.
Mhm.
It's
Yeah,
okay. Constantly. So,
yeah. We should be cautioned against, following our heart all the time.
yeah.
So our heart is a fickle part of us.
Yeah. Um, I also wanted to ask you about kind of you touched on a little bit the current journey, your heart now and how you take it day by day, and the faith and getting to know other brothers and sisters. I don't know if there's a question there, but if you can just speak a little bit about the current state.
It was, like I said, I'm sponsoring somebody in OCIA. I got a kid in OCIC. Um, it's to me, like I said, I learn a little bit each day. I try to find ways. Um, I was poorly catechized growing up, so I'm still trying to learn. And every once in a while, I hear something like, "Hey, there's 24 chapters of Luke, and there's 24 days of December leading up to Christmas. You should read a chapter a day." So I got it open over here. I'm like, "Hey, that's a good idea.
Yeah.
I can do that." Um, but it's little things. One of the first things I wanted to try joining the faith was the Rosary, and I found it very intimidating. It just because there's a certain kind of cadence, and they're talking about, you hear people say, "Oh, it's vain repetition," and I'm like, but there's so much more to it than that. And it's you learn the prayers rather quickly, which and you're supposed to. And then I learned you're supposed to be, meditating on these mysteries of Christ's life, and um, I feel that's something that helps me really connect. Um, like last time I was in line for uh, reconciliation. I thought, rather than just sitting there and looking at my phone or something, I'm just this little nudge in my head. Hey, you should pray a rosary while you're sitting here. I'm doing it real quietly. I don't want to disturb the person to my left and right. I'm like, hey, you got more time. Do a Divine Mercy Chaplet.
Yeah.
And if you learn anything about rosaries, the Divine Mercy Chaplet can be done on any rosary. Because there's some other chaplets like I have like a Seven Sorrows or a Saint Michael or Saint Joseph, and they're organized slightly differently. But if you want to do something other than a rosary, Divine Mercy Chaplet's a good idea because it's the exact same number and pacing. But that's my current journey. It was a lot of adapting and changing my life, not expecting the church to change for me. One of the reasons I feel like the Catholic Church is where I need to be, is that it seems like everybody else has swords drawn on the Catholic Church, if that makes sense.
Yeah, of course.
Like I think, and I'm not pointing to any one person or any one particular, but my experience is that Catholics tend to be, and again, there's always exceptions, tend to be a little friendlier to the Orthodox, and the Orthodox are to the Catholics. And when some denominations want to criticize stuff, it seems like they don't go after the Orthodox; they go back to the Catholics. I don't know if you're a movie fan, but I don't know if you ever saw John Wick 2 or anything like that.
No, I haven't. I know about it. Yeah.
Yeah, he's got the posters. You don't even see the movie. The poster, he's standing in the middle, and everybody's got their guns and knives and everything pointing at him. And sometimes I feel like that's the Catholic Church. If somebody wants to mock something
Yep.
Christian, they go after the Catholic Church.
Yes.
And I felt like, Christ doesn't promise us an easy walk with Him necessarily. He said, you'll be persecuted, and for my sake. And I feel like a lot of people, I felt like that just only made me more confident that I made the right choice. In many ways, I don't know if I really made that many choices. I feel like I was drawn to it.
Yeah,
I just quit fighting it, is what I did. I quit
yeah,
fighting it.
that's well said. Yeah, I've noticed that too. I mean, it's not to say that other Christian groups are not persecuted. I know you're not saying that.
Oh,
But
no, not at all.
I also did some studying about that, and the number of groups that exist in protest of the Catholic Church. If you
Yeah.
go back, their genesis is tied to a protest. And in fact, they would have the unity found in being aligned on protesting the Catholic Church. When I saw that, that just cemented it even further. And not to mention, again, there are exceptions, as you said, but a lot of times those that break from the church have a very palpable animosity towards the church.
Yeah, I noticed that.
It's to me, I'm going to say it's undeniable. Like when you start to see the spirit of anger and bitterness, unforgiveness, and I've studied a lot of this. Again, there are exceptions, but you can start to see kind of maybe you can see an average, if that makes sense. So if you're looking at all the numbers, what's the average of what you're experiencing. And I would just see this common, just relentless attack, more focused even on protesting than on carrying their own crosses, denying themselves, and pursuing unity, not pursuing more division. That's
Yeah.
the other thing. We all suffer from that. Don't get me wrong, but your point is well taken for sure. Yeah.
Yeah, I've noticed that sometimes, but in my experience, I am I have a lot to learn, and I'm by no means perfect. But my experience, sometimes if you uh, patiently, calmly explain the faith
Yeah.
to the best of my ability, and I'll say, and I'll qualify, hey, I'm not 100% certain. I got a catechism over here. Let me have a look. But if you patiently explain the faith, every once in a while somebody will say, so you guys do read the Bible? And I'm like, oh yeah, I was told you guys did it. You know, I'm like, yeah, every mass, three, technically four readings, if you want to count the responsorial psalm, however you want to categorize that, but three distinct readings for sure. And they're like, oh, really? What does a mass look like? Well, and you explain it. And then I said, do you want to go sometime? Yeah, probably. Maybe I do. And this is, it's like a conversation I had with a friend recently. Um, where it's just I feel like as Catholics we can just kind of calmly and explain and not in any
No.
and I'm not saying I haven't done it wrong too. I've been like, hey, we
Yeah.
do it this way, we do it this way, or you make some claim and then that will isolate people. So you got to really know your audience,
Yep.
and you know uh, bees with honey and all that. Um, One thing I haven't made good on it yet, but I have a sister, and she's fine with me telling you this. But I had a sister. I have a sister. Tyler and I have a sister, and she agreed to go to adoration with me one time. You know, and I thought, wow, that's a big deal. From coming outside the Catholic faith,
Absolutely.
that's a
Yeah.
really big deal. But and to anybody that doesn't know what adoration is when you get to sit in the presence of Christ. It's a consecrated host, monstrance, and uh, which I was told sounds like a demonstrate. That's where the word came from. I don't know.
Mm.
So I was like, oh, that makes sense. But one of the most peaceful things I've ever done. I had this call at work up at like 3 a.m. one time. Car crash, drugs, guns, pursuit, bad stuff, bad stuff. Nobody got hurt. Not a member of the public, not a cop, not the guy that got in a little bit of trouble that night, not one of the police dogs. I mean, worst case scenario, a Jaguar car. I think it was Jaguar. It was done. That's property. They make lots of those. Can't replace people. We can replace cars. Not a big deal. And I felt I was real close up to Holy Apostles, and they have 24-hour adoration. So I was like, um, I'm in my vest with my cowboy hat on and my shoes. I got grass all over them. So I walk in the door and I take my shoes off immediately. I don't want it because it's very clean, and so I walk in there in my socks. But um, I just wanted to sit with Christ for a minute and just be thankful that nobody got hurt.
Wow.
So I just, I was like, I had to literally drive by. I'm going to go take just a few minutes. And I know typically people stay longer, but there was somebody there and I didn't want to
Yep.
interrupt them or anything. And they're registered for up to an hour or more. I just wanted to go in there and just show some gratitude that these crazy things happened and nobody got hurt. And
Wow.
I was very, very thankful for that.
How long
So,
ago was that?
uh, probably the very beginning of August. So it was during the summer because I'm back out of school now. But
Mm. Wow.
I said, no, I need to go in there. So,
Yeah.
I felt, like it's funny. I have all this gear and equipment on, and I try to tiptoe around like a mouse, just be quiet and reverence and respectful. And I think I was a little dusty. I don't think I even sat in a pew. I think I just knelt for a little bit. I don't want to get into leave no trace, so to speak.
Yeah. That's
Uh,
good. That's good. How did your If you don't mind, how did your sister respond? Did she say
I
anything
asked her
about
to
the
go, and she's
experience?
like, and forgive me if I didn't convey that, but I asked her, I said, would you like to go to adoration sometime? I knew she was having kind of a tough time. She's like,
Yeah.
yeah, I'd like to go.
Yeah.
Um, she's of a Protestant faith tradition. It's been doing it for a few years. And she always says this thing, and again, she'd be fine with me saying this, but she'll say, we're we have a lot of like Catholic viewpoints. It's just we're real close. Just real close. We got all these things, we're real close. And I just want to be like, but I don't want to push her. I don't want to be pushy or nothing, but I just want to be like, well, just help taking our step. Let's just go a little further, um but I thought that was really amazing that she agreed. And this reminds me that I need to make good on it. Take her sometime. It's a really if you told me about that 10 years ago, I would say, what is that even?
Yeah. Yeah. A lot of
And
people
now,
do. Yeah. A lot of people
and
know
it's
about that.
it's an absolutely peaceful, peace bringing, beautiful experience.
Yeah.
So
For a lot of people, myself very much included, if you don't know about like retreats, you don't know what silence is, that is monumental to go in for the first time to adoration, especially if you're by yourself. Oh my goodness.
mhm.
Even someone that's not Catholic, if they went into a chapel and they would learn how to just be silent, I believe, oh my goodness, it's such a powerful thing. I can't even go past that. It's crazy how peaceful it can be to just be alone with the Lord. And again, this is the Catholic sacramentality, the visible, the as I said earlier, the tangible. That's the part that is so beautiful. We have senses. We were made with senses for a reason, and it's amazing when it starts to come together. Um,
Yeah, I
yeah,
agree.
yeah,
um and not even rising to that level of adoration, but just the I think that there's a lot of beauty in our parishes, and
yeah,
in our um, adoration of itself is a very beautiful thing. That's quiet, that like you said, that silence. Um, but I wanted to bring up the other one, just stained glass and art, things
yeah.
like that. And I wanted to bring it up because I know we're running out of time here. Um, but you talk about the beauty of it, and the iconoclastic view
Hmm.
never really sat with me. You know,
Really?
growing up, with vaguely Protestant, it never really sat with me. Like, why can't you have a picture?
Yeah,
You know, um, why can't that doesn't sit? That always kind of it didn't feel right. If that makes sense. Um,
you know what it, if I may,
yeah.
um, I view that among many other things as an overcorrection, and what you do in a state of anger. So, for example, you ever give a consequence to your boy that in the moment you just like, yeah, I know you can't whatever do such and such for a year,
Mhm.
5 years, right? And then after a while, hopefully you go back and you're like, son, that was a bit extreme.
Yeah.
Maybe I took it too far. So the removal of all images took that a little too far. That's that's how I view it. Like what? But
Yeah.
over time, and if you are in a lot of dysfunctional relationships, you might be too proud to admit that you went too far. And so
Oh, yeah. That
then
makes
you
sense.
just keep that stance perpetually. So anyway, you were gonna finish your thought, I think.
Oh no, I think you covered it well. I just want to throw that out there. That one, there was a
Yeah.
couple things that like um Confession's a big one. Images and use of statues is one that people are like, whoa, that's different. Um, and then I know, like I said, we're running out of time, but the reverence we hold for Mary is something that some people have some. I got a very excited Doberman here.
Oh, no worries.
The reverence we hold for Mary was something a lot of people don't understand, and one thing that always, somebody said to me one time, and it kind of, I never understood the dislike or disrespect of Mary. That was another one that was easy, was a natural thing for me, because it didn't make sense to me. Why would you be, you know, um, disrespectful to Mary?
Yeah.
And so that was an easy segue. But to those that have some doubts, or it's a new idea. Somebody said once, and I heard it, I'm like, that makes sense to me. They said, if you, I wouldn't want to go before the Lord and say I was disrespectful about his mom, and I'm like, yeah, that totally makes sense. Um, so, anytime anybody asks, ever wants to pray a rosary, I'm available. It's something I learn something each and every time.
Yeah.
It's a really cool thing.
Beautiful.
So,
Jason, fantastic. So happy that you are in the church, and I think there's a lot to learn from what you just shared. One of the key aspects, I think, is the draw that you felt, and
yeah,
you went with it.
it was magnetic.
Magnetic.
It's just. But even then, I had that brief moment. Am
Well, I
I
was going
here?
to say, yeah,
Is this right?
there's so many people that have that. They feel the draw, but they have free will. They still have free will. So they can delay that pull for a year, 5 years, 20 years. But obviously the prayer for all of those people is to surrender in the most beautiful way and join the church, and then go proclaim. So that's a key part, I think. When a person joins, right, and they've given themselves, so they've emptied themselves, kenosis, right? They've emptied themselves in order to imitate Christ. Once they've emptied themselves and they've learned to lay down their lives, again, imperfectly, don't get me wrong,
Oh yeah,
but
I get it.
but you've taken that huge step, then you can be the charisma, the proclamation out to the world. So you don't just come here and say, now I'm part of the church and everything's great. We're all called to then continue that self-emptying so that we can proclaim, and so that people can say, okay, I see something in you. That's the point. We're all trying to do that.
I'd say each day you can learn a little more and do a little better.
Yeah.
And it's a journey. It's something you have to be vigilant about and passionate about. But there's the depth of it, and the richness of it, and the things to learn, that there's more than a lifetime's worth, to keep imitating Christ best we can in our very imperfect way,
and just keep going. What was it that you told your son? Just keep doing our best. I think that's what you said.
Something to that effect. Yeah, just
something like that. Yeah,
just do a little. He'll say, well, we're not perfect like Jesus.
Oh yeah.
One time he gets evaluated sometimes on how he did in school for the day, and he's like, why didn't it get perfect? Because only Jesus is perfect. I'm like, you can get a perfect score on your behavior for a day, dude. That's not the same thing. I'm like, he thinks like a little lawyer sometimes.
Oh my goodness, I'm not perfect, Dad. What do you want?
Yeah, but I say, we can always work on it a little more, and try a little better, to be as Christ-like as we can.
Very good.
And it's like, oh, okay.
Yeah. So
he's very excited for baptism, but I got to tell him there's a lot of other stuff that comes with that.
Yeah.
So, I'm trying to do my part to educate. In addition, the program's great and they're teaching them a lot, but I can't leave it up to one day a week. We do something a little bit every day.
Absolutely.
So, because I feel like as a father, that's my number one role.
Yeah.
So,
Amen.
You know, prepare my kid for the kingdom. So
yeah. Well, thanks again, Jason. Thank you everyone for
thank you,
watching.
Eddie.
Please subscribe, share, comment, and until next time, take care and God bless. Bye.